Hidden beneath Virginia's strong economy and high employment numbers, there's an industry that is literally going south. In the last year in Southwest Virginia alone, more than 3,000 people who worked in the clothing industry lost their jobs, and in many cases, the companies that let them go are hiring replacement workers in Mexico. Why is this happening, and who's doing the work that used to be done here in Virginia? Well, we sent Scott Goldberg to Mexico to find out.
Well, Keith, in a perfect world, apparel companies say everything would be made in the USA, but they say it's getting too competitive out there, so the companies save money using Mexican labor. Tonight, photojournalist Howard Swank and I will introduce you to someone whose job used to be done in America and to a Virginian who lost her job as the apparel industry is going south. Matamoros, Mexico is getting bigger. The border town, already 5 times the size of Roanoke, adds thousands of new jobs every year. One of those jobs belongs to Alicia Lopez. I never worked before, she said. This is my first job. I've been here a year, and I like it. Before jobs like Alicia's moved south from the United States, they paid more than $7 an hour. In Matamoros, Alicia told us, she gets $7 a day. To pay the rent where she lives, in a one-room apartment with her sister, it takes 2 incomes.
¿Necesitan ustedes el dinero de 2 trabajos?
Sí.
Yes, because the economic crisis is very big here, she said, and in order to get ahead, we both need to work to cover household expenses. I can't say we have the best, but we're living.
Mama, what are you doing?
Fixing supper like I always do.
It was 22 years ago that Alice Campbell was starting her career in sewing, a career that ended last fall. Her company could no longer afford to make a line of clothing in America, and Alice was laid off.
It was tough. It was really hard at first because that was my life. That's all I'd done.
Alice lives with her husband and 5 children in Botetourt County. Her 5-bedroom house may be a world away from Alicia's apartment in Matamoros, but their stories are bound by a common thread. Both lives changed when companies stopped sewing in America.
Are you bitter?
No, not at all. I really feel like it was a blessing in disguise because had it not happened, I wouldn't have been able to go to school.
Alice calls her layoff a chance to learn new skills, get a better job, and ultimately bring home more money. Alicia calls her life comfortable and plans to keep working at the sewing factory. Well, I don't know if I'll work here forever, she said, but I plan to work here for a while. 2 lives are going in new directions because the apparel industry is going south. Not everyone would call a layoff a blessing in disguise. We'll hear from other apparel workers who lost their jobs later this week. Tomorrow, we'll tell the story behind the layoffs, why apparel companies say they have no choice but to send work to Mexico. Keith.
All very interesting, Scott. Thanks. Stocks took off from the start today and never looked back. The Dow jumped 213 points to close. We've already introduced you to a Mexican worker with a new sewing job and an American worker who was laid off from hers. Tonight, the story behind apparel layoffs. Scott Goldberg is here with the second part in his look on the apparel industry.
Well, Keith, we've told this story many times. People who have worked in the garment factories for their entire careers come to work one day and they find out they've lost their jobs. It's hard for many of them to understand why American companies are using foreign labor. But ask the companies why they're sending work to Mexico, and they'll tell you that going south is their only choice. It's no coincidence. Jobs are coming to Matamoros, Mexico, and to factories like this, while sewing factories in Virginia are becoming extinct.
All of our jobs have gone to Mexico, and they just can't survive like it is. And I don't know what I'll do.
When apparel jobs leave Virginia, some of them come to cities like Matamoros, and in the last few years, it's become much easier for American companies to send jobs south of the border.
Gracias.
We visited a manufacturing complex called Novolin, where the North American Free Trade Agreement is helping American companies save money. NAFTA lets those companies send raw materials here, pay Mexicans a fraction of what they paid American sewers, then ship the finished product back into the States without paying a tariff when the goods cross the border.
What you see in here, for the most part, are jobs now that are coming back from Asia.
Novalink partner Bill Wolf, like anyone familiar with the clothing industry, will tell you the market is flooded with cheap imports from Asia. To compete, Wolf said, American companies must come to factories like his.
Or they fold. They sell the equipment for 10 cents on the dollar, and they fold, they go away.
The alternative is Asia, and there's a big difference.
Larry Martin, president of the American Apparel Manufacturers Association, said the alternative makes plants like Novalink look pretty good.
Those plants use U.S. fabric, U.S. buttons, U.S. zippers, U.S. transportation. So although the sewing is occurring someplace in Mexico or El Salvador, there are a lot of Americans working because of those plants in Mexico.
Even though Martin said American companies would ideally make everything in the USA, the economic reality is American consumers look at price tags, not labels.
Okay, that shirt was made in Guatemala. Okay, you just cast a vote. When you put down your money, you said, I like shirts made in Guatemala.
As long as consumers demand low prices, companies like Toltex, driven by their bottom line, say they have to lay off workers.
Overall, you have to do the best you can to be profitable.
The solution? Instead of paying Americans an average of $9 or $10 an hour, apparel companies are going south, creating new jobs in places like Novalink, where Alicia Lopez told us she's making $7 a day.
Even in Mexico, $7 a day is not a lot of money. How can somebody earning that make ends meet? The answer to that question tomorrow.
It's a complicated story, isn't it?
It's very complicated.
Scott Goldberg, thanks. Blue chips dip, but tech stocks roll. The Dow. By Friday, 85% of the sewing work done for Toltex will be done in Mexico. The Martinsville-based company is closing a North Carolina sewing plant. 145 people will lose their jobs. Toltex still has 3 sewing operations here in Virginia, but like so many other companies, Toltex said competitive pressures are forcing it to take advantage of cheap labor south of the border. And that is exactly what we've been talking about this week in our series, Going South. It's hard to imagine making a living on $7 a day, but thousands of workers in Mexico are doing just that. And Scott Goldberg is here to show us an example south of the border.
Well, Keith, she earns wages that would put her way below the poverty level in the United States. And even in Mexico, $7 a day is not a lot of money, but it is considered a decent living. Tonight, the story of a Mexican woman and how far she stretches what little she has as we continue our look at an American industry that's going south.
Alicia Lopez is doing the same work that paid an average of $9 or $10 an hour in America. In Mexico, Alicia told us, she's earning $7 a day. Just enough money, she said, to buy what she needs.
Pues se limita no mucho.
Well, she said, you limit yourself a lot, but I can buy the most important things like food and clothes. Alicia shares a modest one-room dwelling with her sister. Without help from her sister's income, Alicia couldn't afford the apartment, because even though she's single, Alicia is not just providing for herself.
Every month after Alicia pays the rent, she still has enough money left over to send to her family that works on a farm on the other side of Mexico.
We help them financially, she said, because they live far away, and as their children, we have the obligation to help them.
Many of the people come here and they care and they take care of their parents.
Matamoros Economic Development Chief Jorge Guerra said workers like Alicia don't take low-paying factory jobs for granted. The opportunity to work in what's called a maquiladora is an opportunity the rest of her family doesn't have.
The worker has a standard of living better now working in a maquiladora than what they had some years ago when they didn't have a job or when they were in the fields.
Which explains why Alicia and her co-workers are so excited about their jobs that seemingly pay so little.
¿Es un trabajo nuevo para usted?
Sí.
Yes, this was my first job. They gave me my first opportunity, and thank God, my job is going very well. What's more, the factory has perks most American workplaces don't. A child care center for those who need it, a medical clinic that's always staffed. The jobs may not pay what they paid in America, but they're jobs Alicia and her co-workers are proud to have.
That, of course, is no consolation to an American worker who has been laid off. Tomorrow, the long road back to work for the people whose jobs were sent to Mexico.
All very interesting. Scott Goldberg, thank you. When the DuPont plant in Martinsville closed 8 months ago, hundreds of textile workers lost their jobs. If your job were sent to Mexico, the government would pay to teach you new skills. That might help you get a different job, but would it make you feel any better about what had happened? Scott Goldberg is here tonight with more on the struggling apparel industry and how all this has affected the workers.
Well, Keith, just this morning, Martinsville's Toltex Corporation announced profits were way down in 1998. That's the second straight losing year for a company that had a 60-year winning streak, which is more evidence Toltex will tell you it needs to cut its losses. And one way it's done that is cut Americans out of its workforce. But has it become too easy to send jobs to Mexico? And what happens after the layoffs? Tonight, the Virginia workers who watched their jobs go south.
One by one, they're going out of business. Garment factories are leaving thousands out of work. And time after time, workers say they hear that giant sucking sound.
And I just think that NAFTA and Mexico is one again.
Apparel companies say without the North American Free Trade Agreement, they'd go out of business. But unions call NAFTA an invitation to send jobs out of the country.
That huge sucking sound that you hear, that's jobs going away, as Ross Perot said. But it's a fact.
We went over all these rules.
When Betty Shelton lost her sewing job, the government paid to send her back to school. Now she's studying for her high school equivalency diploma and wondering why she's sitting in a classroom instead of behind a sewing machine.
Now, why would they take my job and say, send it to Mexico and I need a job here?
American workers are not alone. Mexicans also worry about NAFTA, and when they get laid off, some Mexicans blame NAFTA for sending their jobs north of the border.
This is two ways.
Jorge Guerra is Director of Economic Development in Matamoros, Mexico.
Maybe you lose some sewers when the company comes here, but you gain a lot of jobs in the textile fabrication.
And that's the argument apparel companies make, that Mexican sewers use American raw materials, so NAFTA must be creating jobs for people making fabric.
No way. Not unless you call the fast food restaurants, the jobs coming, you know, this way, because that's all they seem to be building is more restaurants. Be specific and use examples.
Back in the classroom, Betty Shelton is learning there are no easy answers.
I'm qualified for a sewing machine. Now, why would I want to go to another sewing factory when they are just being snatched away each day?
For Betty and the thousands like her, the challenge is learning skills that will get them jobs in a high-tech economy, while they try to understand that economy that made the apparel industry go south.
There are some sewing companies that need American workers. Made Best in Salem, for example, is hiring but said nobody's applying. If companies can't find workers here, they have to go somewhere else, which would be one more reason why so many companies have gone south, sending American jobs to Mexico.
It's interesting how many of these things cut both ways. There's two sides to everything, and sometimes 4 or 6 sides.
There's a lot to this story, yeah.
Scott Goldberg, thanks for your work. A Lynchburg attorney has been fined.
This week on News 7, we followed the trail of American jobs all the way to Mexico. And when we sent Scott Goldberg and photographer Howard Swank to Mexico to cover the story, we gave them one special assignment: bring back a reporter's notebook, a story telling us what it was like to be a Virginia news crew in Mexico. Here's another look at their trip from the lighter side.
At first, it sure seemed like driving in Mexico would be easy.
Buenos dias.
I paid $1.25. She said, have a good day. But once we rolled across that bridge and into another country, sitting behind the wheel got a little bit trickier. As soon as we crossed the border, we learned 2 things about this country. Number 1, you don't need a driver's license to drive here.
No speed limits.
And number 2, if you want good Mexican food, you really should come to Mexico. When we weren't stuck in traffic or working, of course, we were eating just about anything we could get our hands on.
Una copa chica.
Even if a street vendor sold it.
This is wonderful bar, you know?
That afternoon, after we finished our shrimp cocteles, Juliano invited us into his bar. He offered us beers and taught us a new phrase.
Se puede, pero no se debe. Sí.
Sí se puede, pero no se debe. Yes, we could, but no, we shouldn't. Hey, we were working. And this is where we did a lot of our work, inside a sewing factory. Here's Howard, who normally took the pictures and let me handle the interviews, interviewing the woman who helped arrange our visit.
So has Mr. Goldberg done a good job?
Yes, he has. He was very nice, even when we first started talking. And has anybody told you look like Jerry Seinfeld?
Yeah, I've heard that once or twice before.
If it seems like people were incredibly nice in Mexico, we found that they were. We felt welcomed wherever we went, which was a new experience for a news crew. Proof we really were in a foreign country. With this reporter's notebook, I'm Scott Goldberg, News 7, Matamoros, Mexico.
So we see photographer Howard Swank eating and flirting. Is that an accurate portrayal, would you say?
Well, he works a lot too, but yeah, eating and flirting, I think, happens every once in a while. Every once in a while, mostly just hard at work.